Commander Buzz Kaplan of the diplomatic vessel, definitely not a warship, was having what he'd generously call a less-than-stellar first contact experience. In his defense, no one had warned him that the universal greeting gesture of a smile would be interpreted by the Galactic Council as a primitive war cry, displaying one's bone-crushing teeth. "Please remain calm," he said to the room full of panicking alien diplomats, which only made things worse, because apparently showing teeth while talking was considered a sign of imminent violence in 17 different star systems. The ship's name wasn't helping either. Some genius in Earth's diplomatic corps thought they were being clever with that one. Real subtle guys, Kaplan thought, making a mental note to find whoever was responsible and introduce them to Earth's time-honored tradition of leaving a strongly worded note in the break room. "The humans are displaying their feeding apparatus while transmitting sonic waves," shrieked Representative Mextel, a being who looked like what would happen if you asked an AI to draw a cross between a seahorse and a disco ball. "They're assessing our nutritional value." Kaplan closed his mouth firmly and tried to look as non-threatening as possible, which is surprisingly difficult when you're a 6-foot-tall bipedal creature facing a room full of aliens who apparently evolved from various species of anxiety-ridden space plankton. "Ambassador Zix," Kaplan addressed the least terrified-looking alien, a tall, willowy being with crystalline features who had at least stopped trying to hide behind their ceremonial staff. "We come in peace." He raised his hand in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture, immediately realizing his mistake when he remembered this species had evolved from prey animals that were historically grabbed by flying predators. The high-pitched sound Zix made could have shattered glass, if any of the windows in the diplomatic chamber weren't made of transparent aluminum. "The human is displaying its grasping appendage. Battle stations. No, wait," Kaplan tried to explain, lowering his hand and accidentally triggering another panic response, because rapid downward movement was apparently a sign of attacking behavior in yet another alien species. At this point, he was seriously considering just standing perfectly still and communicating through interpretive blinking. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Some species began extending their defensive spines, others started secreting various alarm pheromones, and one particularly dramatic delegate simply fainted, their gelatinous forms spreading across the floor in what Kaplan had to admit was a rather impressive display of evolutionary self-preservation. "The human remains motionless, analyzing our defensive capabilities," announced the Council's Chief of Security, a being that resembled an origami butterfly made of titanium. "Such tactical patience! Truly, they are the most cunning of predators." Kaplan fought the urge to facepalm, knowing that any sudden movement towards his own head would probably be interpreted as some sort of ritual combat preparation. The fact that humans had achieved faster-than-light travel was starting to feel like a cosmic clerical error. "Perhaps," he suggested carefully, keeping his voice low and trying not to move his lips too much, "we should take a brief recess to collect ourselves." This somehow made things even worse, as the word recess was apparently similar to an ancient war cry in one of the Council species' languages. The chamber's emergency containment fields snapped into place, and Kaplan found himself surrounded by a shimmering barrier of energy, while warning klaxons began blaring in 6-part harmony. "The human has invoked the ancient combat ritual," declared one of the Council members, their eye stalks vibrating with alarm. "They seek to establish dominance through traditional warfare." Kaplan stared at the ceiling of the chamber, contemplating the life choices that had led him to this moment. He'd wanted to be a pastry chef, but no, he just had to follow the family tradition of space exploration. He could have been making eclairs right now, but instead he was accidentally terrifying a room full of aliens with his basic facial expressions. "Would it help if I just stood in the corner and thought quiet thoughts?" he offered, immediately regretting his words as 3 different species began emergency evacuation procedures, because corners were apparently sacred spaces in their cultures. As the chaos continued to unfold around him, Kaplan realized with growing certainty that this was going to be a very, very long day, and somewhere in the vast expanse of space he was absolutely certain that whoever named his ship was laughing their arse off. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was going about as well as a chocolate teapot in a supernova. Kaplan sat in what he'd been told was the designated diplomatic observation pod, though it looked suspiciously like a maximum security containment unit with better lighting. Ambassador Zhix had taken the floor, their crystalline form refracting light in what the Council species apparently considered a soothing pattern. "Esteemed colleagues," they began, their translator rendering their speech into standard galactic with only minor feedback squeals. "We must address the human situation with all due precision." Kaplan noticed they'd positioned 7 different types of energy shields between his pod and the Council floor. He was starting to feel like the galaxy's most disappointing zoo exhibit. "Our initial analysis suggests that humans are far more terrifying than we initially feared," Zhix continued, bringing up a holoscreen filled with what appeared to be heavily redacted Earth tourism brochures. "They deliberately construct artificial mountains and then hurl themselves down them at high speeds. For entertainment." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. One delegate's chromatophores began displaying emergency broadcast test patterns. "Surely you mean for military training?" asked Representative Mextel, their disco ball surface dimming with concern. "No," Zhix replied gravely. "They call it skiing." Several councillors began stress-molting. Kaplan considered explaining the concept of fun, but decided that might cause an interstellar incident again. "Furthermore," Zhix continued, their crystal segments clinking nervously, "they regularly gather in large numbers to observe ritualized combat between specialized warriors who attempt to move an inflated leather sphere across designated territory lines." "These must be their war games," theorized the security chief, their titanium wings folding and unfolding anxiously. "Clearly preparation for planetary invasion scenarios." "Actually," Kaplan interjected through the pod's communication system, "that's just football, or soccer depending on where you're from." The council erupted into another panic. "They have multiple names for their combat rituals. Their warfare protocols are so complex, they require separate classification systems." Kaplan slumped in his observation pod. "That's not what Never mind." He was beginning to understand why Earth's previous diplomatic missions had all ended with strongly worded letters of apology and several requests for psychological counseling. The Council's archival specialist, a being that appeared to be a sentient library catalogue with tentacles, pulled up more data. Most disturbing is their method of selecting planetary leaders. They engage in something called politics. "Explain this politics," demanded one of the councillors, their fear glands visibly swelling. "They gather in large groups," the archivist explained, tentacles trembling, "engage in verbal combat, make promises they don't intend to keep, and then participate in a process called voting, which appears to be a way of determining which warrior has the superior propaganda techniques." Kaplan had to admit they weren't entirely wrong about that one. "And their information distribution networks," added Zhix, pulling up screenshots of various social media platforms, "are filled with something called memes, which we believe to be encrypted military communications hidden within images of small Earth predators and oddly positioned text." "Those are just cat pictures," Kaplan tried to explain. "They're funny." "The human claims their military codes are humorous," shrieked one of the councillors. "Such psychological warfare sophistication." A junior analyst rushed in, waving what appeared to be a tablet made of living tissue. "Emergency update. We've discovered humans have developed weapons of mass destruction they call puns." The council chamber descended into chaos once again. 3 different species simultaneously initiated their species equivalent of filing emergency paperwork, which in one case involved spontaneously budding into 3 separate entities. "Perhaps," suggested Zhix, trying to restore order, "we should consider implementing a galaxy-wide quarantine around Earth's solar system, for safety." "Oh, come on," Kaplan protested. "Isn't that a bit of an overreaction?" The human uses psychological manipulation techniques to question our judgment, announced the security chief. Clearly they are masters of cognitive warfare. Kaplan watched as the council began drafting what had to be the most paranoid containment protocol in galactic history. He seriously considered trying to explain human interpretive dance just to see what would happen, but his sense of self-preservation finally kicked in. As the council descended into another round of panic-induced bureaucracy, Kaplan pulled out his personal tablet and began drafting his mission report. Day 2 of First Contact. Accidentally convinced galactic community that humans are hyper-intelligent deathworlders with complex military codes hidden in cat pictures. Request immediate transfer to literally anywhere else. Also, we're going to need more coffee. He had no way of knowing that last line would trigger the next major diplomatic crisis, but in retrospect, he really should have seen it coming. In retrospect, Kaplan probably shouldn't have asked his ship's AI to synthesize him a cup of coffee during the Council's emergency threat assessment meeting. In his defense, it had been a very long day, and he hadn't realized the observation pod was equipped with atmospheric content analyzers. The first sign of trouble was when the Council's environmental safety officer, a being that looked like a quantum computer had tried to knit a jellyfish, began emitting alarmed beeping noises. Security breach. The human is producing a chemical weapon. Their tentacles writhed in patterns that somehow managed to convey both horror and bureaucratic satisfaction at having something new to file reports about. Kaplan looked down at his steaming mug of perfectly innocent coffee. "It's just caffeine," he said, which turned out to be exactly the wrong thing to say. Caffeine? Zix's crystalline form vibrated with alarm. The neural stimulant? The psychoactive compound? You willingly consume this military-grade enhancement drug? The council chamber erupted into its now familiar panic mode, though Kaplan had to admit they were getting more organized about it. The various species had apparently worked out a rotation for who got to panic first. "Actually," Kaplan said, taking a sip because at this point, why not? "Most humans drink this multiple times a day." The security chief's titanium wings clattered against their carapace. "Multiple doses? Daily? Their warriors maintain a constant state of chemical enhancement." "We're not warriors," Kaplan protested. "Some of us just can't function without our morning coffee." This somehow made things even worse. The archival specialist tentacles began rapidly updating the threat assessment database. They've evolved dependency on combat stimulants. Their entire species requires regular doses of performance-enhancing chemicals just to maintain basic functionality. "Hold on," said Representative Mextel, their disco ball surface flickering with sudden insight. "Are you suggesting that humans in their natural state are even more aggressive than what we've observed, and this coffee is actually a sedative to make them manageable?" "What? No." Kaplan took another sip of coffee, causing several councillors to activate their personal shield generators. "It just helps us wake up in the morning. Their normal state is unconsciousness." A wave of new terror swept through the chamber. "They require chemical assistance just to achieve consciousness, yet they've achieved interstellar travel." The junior analyst from earlier burst in again, their living tablet now displaying what appeared to be a coffee shop menu. "Update! They have entire establishments dedicated to the distribution of these chemical compounds. They combine them with sweeteners and dairy products in hundreds of different formulations. Clearly a sophisticated military supply network," declared the security chief. "Each variation must be calibrated for different combat scenarios." Kaplan watched as they pulled up images of various coffee drinks. The council's reaction to a pumpkin spice latte was particularly memorable. They disguised their combat stimulants as seasonal beverages. The psychological warfare implications are staggering. And look, the environmental officer's quantum-knitted form pulsed with alarm. Some humans combine this caffeine with another compound called alcohol. "Irish coffee is hardly a weapon of mass destruction," Kaplan muttered, but the council was beyond listening. "They mix depressants with stimulants. Their biochemical mastery is terrifying." Zix was practically vibrating at their resonant frequency. No species should have such control over their consciousness. The archival specialist tentacles were now typing so fast they'd achieved liftoff. New intelligence suggests they have an even more potent variant called espresso. It's just concentrated coffee, Kaplan explained, immediately regretting his word choice. Concentrated. The council collectively recoiled. They distill their combat drugs into even more powerful forms. An emergency motion was quickly drafted to classify all coffee and coffee-related products as controlled substances of war. Kaplan watched in bemused horror as they added cappuccinos to the same regulatory category as antimatter weapons. Perhaps, he suggested, we should move on to discussing trade agreements. He held up his now empty coffee mug. We could start small, maybe with some decaf. The human carries an empty chemical weapon delivery device, shouted the security chief, and proposes to expand their stimulant distribution network to other worlds. Kaplan set down his mug very carefully. Would it help if I switched to tea? The resulting chaos when they discovered humans also consumed tea leaves steeped in hot water made the coffee panic look like a minor diplomatic hiccup. Kaplan made a mental note to never ever tell them about energy drinks. As the council frantically began drafting protocols to protect the galaxy from Earth's weaponized beverage program, Kaplan added to his mission report, Day 2, afternoon, accidentally convinced Galactic Council that humans are drug-dependent combat specialists who can't achieve consciousness without chemical assistance. Request immediate coffee rations. Also, please send help, preferably decaf. When Earth's diplomatic corps finally responded to Kaplan's increasingly desperate mission reports, they did so in what they apparently thought was the most appropriate way possible. With memes. Lots and lots of memes. The first transmission to the Galactic Council consisted entirely of "This is fine" dog panels, which the alien intelligence analysts spent 6 hours trying to decode before declaring it clearly a complex metaphor for humanity's casual approach to existential threats. Kaplan watched from his observation pod as they projected a woman yelling at cat meme onto the main council screen. The council's top xenolinguists had been staring at it for the past 20 minutes. Clearly, announced one analyst, their bioluminescent spots pulsing with academic excitement, this depicts an ancient human conflict between their feline overlords and the warrior priestess caste. Actually, Kaplan tried to interject, it's just the human attempts to mislead us about their cultural documentation. The security chief's wings fanned anxiously. Such dedication to their deception protocols. The next transmission from Earth contained nothing but galaxy brain memes about first contact scenarios. The Council's reaction was predictably spectacular. Their cognitive enhancement capabilities extend to physical brain expansion. Zix's crystalline form sparkled with alarm. No wonder they require constant caffeine stimulation. Ambassador Mitchesteel's disco ball surface was displaying what appeared to be a PowerPoint presentation about human communication patterns. Notice how they layer their military codes with increasing complexity. Each image builds upon the last, creating a fractal pattern of strategic implications. Those are just jokes, Kaplan explained, which was apparently the wrong thing to say because 3 different species immediately began emergency encryption protocols. They disguised their tactical communications as humor. The archival specialist tentacles were now typing in 4 different languages simultaneously. Every transmission could contain hidden military directives. Things got exponentially worse when someone from Earth decided to send over a collection of classic rickrolls. The Council spent 2 hours analyzing Rick Astley's dance moves for hidden combat techniques. The human warrior priest repeatedly states he will never surrender or retreat, noted the security chief, such unwavering dedication to battle doctrine, and he expresses his intention to hurt his opponents, added another analyst, their fear glands now working overtime, yet maintains the facade of courtship rituals throughout the demonstration. Kaplan had to admit they had a point about that last bit. The situation reached new heights of absurdity when Earth sent over a carefully curated selection of cat videos, apparently thinking this would lighten the mood. Instead, the Council became convinced that humanity had evolved alongside and somehow managed to domesticate a species of small, liquid predators with mind control capabilities. They keep miniature apex predators in their dwellings. The environmental officer's quantum-knitted form was practically unraveling with stress. As pets. And they document their every move, added Zix, their crystal facets reflecting the image of a kitten playing with a ball of yarn, clearly monitoring their hunting instincts for military applications. The council chamber descended into chaos once again when someone discovered the concept of chonkers. They selectively breed their predator companions for maximum battle mass. The security chief was now officially filing these videos under biological warfare research. Kaplan watched as they analyzed a grumpy cat compilation with the same intensity usually reserved for decoding enemy battle plans. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "I'm starting to think we might be overthinking this whole first contact thing." The next transmission from Earth consisted entirely of stonks memes about interstellar trade possibilities. The Council's Economic Advisory Board immediately went into emergency session, convinced that humanity had developed some form of fourth-dimensional market manipulation strategy. "Their economic warfare capabilities are beyond our comprehension," declared the Trade Minister, a being that resembled a sentient abacus with too many beads. "They've weaponized mathematical absurdity." As Kaplan watched the Council trying to derive military intelligence from Doge memes, he added to his mission report, "Day 3. Earth's attempt at meme diplomacy has convinced the Galactic Council that humans are masters of encrypted warfare communications, keep armies of mind-controlling predators as pets, and have weaponized mathematical concepts. Request immediate transfer to literally anywhere that doesn't have access to Internet historian videos. Also running low on coffee. Send help. Much urgent. Very diplomatic crisis." Wow. He had no way of knowing that things were about to get even worse when the Council discovered human exercise routines, but at this point, he was almost looking forward to explaining CrossFit to a bunch of aliens who thought humans were already terrifying enough without knowing about burpees. It was during the Council's research into human exercise routines that they stumbled upon the terrifying truth about human evolution. Kaplan knew they'd found something particularly disturbing when the entire xenobiology department simultaneously turned colors he hadn't even known existed. They just keep running," whispered the chief xenobiologist, their tentacles curled into stress spirals, "until their prey dies of exhaustion." "Oh, you mean persistence hunting?" Kaplan asked, immediately regretting his words, as several council members began stress-shedding their outer layers. "Their hunting strategy is to simply follow their prey?" Zizix's crystalline form had taken on a distinctly worried frequency, "until it can no longer continue?" "Well, that's how our ancestors did it," Kaplan explained, somehow managing to make things even worse. "These days we mostly just jog for fun." The council chamber erupted into its now familiar panic mode, though Kaplan noticed they'd installed comfortable fainting couches for the more dramatic species. "They pursue their targets until physical failure occurs." The security chief's wings were clicking in binary code for extreme distress. "And they've turned this into a recreational activity?" "The human cardiovascular system must be a weapon of mass destruction," declared one of the medical experts, a being that appeared to be a sentient collection of hospital charts. Things got exponentially worse when they discovered marathon running. "They willingly run 42.2 kilometers? The environmental officer's quantum-knitted form was displaying error messages. For entertainment? "Actually," Kaplan said, because apparently he hadn't learned his lesson about making things worse, "some people run even longer distances. There's this thing called ultramarathons." 3 different species immediately filed for evolutionary regression. The Council's research team then made the mistake of discovering human horror movies. Their first exposure was to a teenager's Halloween movie night playlist, which led to some interesting conclusions about Earth culture. They create simulated danger scenarios for entertainment. The archival specialist tentacles were now typing in what appeared to be panicked comic sans. They deliberately trigger their own fear responses. And look! The junior analyst's living tablet was displaying a Halloween decoration catalogue. They regularly decorate their habitats with replicas of their own skeletal structures. It's just spooky season stuff, Kaplan tried to explain, but the council was too busy updating their threat assessment protocols to include psychological warfare through recreational terror. The situation reached new heights of absurdity when they discovered human competitive eating contests. They turned the consumption of resources into a combat sport. Zizix was vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter nearby glass. Their digestive capabilities are weaponized. Please, Kaplan pleaded, can we go back to discussing trade agreements? The human attempts to deflect attention from their species' terrifying capabilities, announced the security chief. Clearly they're trying to lull us into a false sense of security. Things got even more complicated when someone discovered parkour videos. Their warriors can ignore conventional obstacles. The council's architectural committee began immediately redesigning all their buildings to be less human traversable. And they appear to be immune to normal gravity constraints, added another analyst watching a compilation of freestyle running. Their bones must be reinforced with some sort of military-grade materials. Kaplan watched as they analyzed human medical documentation with increasing horror. They can regenerate damaged tissues, their bones repair themselves, and they consider this normal? Well, yeah, Kaplan said. We heal. Everyone heals, right? The resulting silence was deafening. Apparently, rapid cellular regeneration was not, in fact, a common trait among council species. Let me get this straight, Zix said, their crystal structure practically vibrating with tension. You pursue prey until physical exhaustion, regularly train your cardiovascular system beyond normal parameters, consume stimulant chemicals for pleasure, keep predators as companions, decorate with representations of death, and your bodies automatically repair damage. When you put it that way, Kaplan admitted, I guess we are kind of intense. The council immediately began drafting what appeared to be a galaxy-wide travel advisory about Earth. Kaplan caught phrases like Death World, Apex Predator Species, and Approach with Extreme Caution being thrown around. As he watched them classify human jogging as a potential weapon of mass destruction, Kaplan added to his mission report, Day 4, Council has discovered human biology is technically a war crime. Request immediate transfer to anywhere that doesn't know about CrossFit. Also, still no coffee. Send help, preferably before they discover competitive hot dog eating contests. He had no idea that their final discovery about human nature would be the most terrifying of all, but that revelation would have to wait until someone explained to the council why humans occasionally got embarrassed about dancing at parties. It was during the council's final threat assessment meeting that they witnessed something that would fundamentally change their understanding of humanity. Commander Buzz Kaplan, alleged representative of a species of chemically enhanced Death World predators, did something completely unexpected. He got awkward at a party. The council had organized what they called a controlled diplomatic interaction scenario, but what was essentially a space office party. They'd even provided him with decaffeinated beverages, which they considered a major security concession. When the council's ceremonial music began playing, Kaplan did something that no fearsome apex predator should ever do. He started swaying slightly off-beat, looked immediately embarrassed, and tried to pretend he was just reaching for the snack table. Fascinating, whispered the xenobiologist, their tentacles unfurling in surprise. The human appears to be experiencing some form of social malfunction. I'm fine, Kaplan said, now trying to look casual while holding a plate of what he hoped was food and not decorative crystals. Just, enjoying the party. The council watched in collective amazement as this supposedly terrifying being from a death world tried to figure out what to do with his free hand while standing alone at a social gathering. "Observe," Zix commented, their crystalline form reflecting Kaplan's awkward shuffle. "Despite their physical capabilities, they appear to be vulnerable to rhythmic movement anxiety. The human exhibits signs of non-lethal social uncertainty," added the security chief, their titanium wings relaxing slightly. "Perhaps they are not the unflinching warriors we believed them to be." Things got even more interesting when another song started playing, and Kaplan began that most human of activities, trying to decide whether or not to dance while simultaneously pretending he wasn't thinking about dancing. Their combat capabilities appear to be severely impaired by recreational social scenarios, noted Ambassador Mextel, their disco ball surface reflecting Kaplan's uncomfortable shifting. "Look," Kaplan said, now holding his drink with both hands just to have something to do with them. "Everyone gets a bit awkward at parties sometimes, right?" The resulting silence suggested that no, apparently other species didn't experience the uniquely human combination of wanting to dance while simultaneously hoping nobody would notice you contemplating dancing. "Are you suggesting," Zix asked carefully, "that your entire species experiences periodic episodes of non-threatening social uncertainty?" "Well, yeah," Kaplan admitted. "We might be persistence predators who drink stimulants and keep smaller predators as pets, but we also get weird about whether to hug or handshake at formal gatherings." This revelation caused a complete reassessment of every human characteristic the Council had classified as terrifying. Suddenly, their caffeine dependency seemed less like chemical enhancement and more like a coping mechanism. Their habit of keeping cats made more sense as a species that just really wanted fuzzy companions. Even their cardiovascular capabilities were recontextualized as possibly being driven by social pressure to get in shape. "So you're telling us," the security chief clarified, "that the same species that can chase prey to exhaustion also gets nervous about whether they're standing weird in social situations." "Pretty much," Kaplan said, finally giving up on looking cool and just leaning against the wall. "We contain multitudes." The Council spent the next hour watching in fascination as Kaplan exhibited other classic human social behaviors, including overthinking whether his laugh sounded weird, second-guessing his choice of snacks, and occasionally checking his reflection in Mexitel's surface to make sure he didn't have anything in his teeth. "Perhaps," suggested Zix, "we should reconsider our classification of humans as an imminent threat to galactic civilization." "They're not warriors hiding their true nature," agreed the xenobiologist. "They're just weird." And so, in a twist that would be recorded in the galactic archives as the social anxiety revelation, humanity's status was officially changed from terrifying death-world predators to protected species too awkward to be threatening. Kaplan's final mission report read, "Day 5, accidentally saved diplomatic relations by being bad at dancing. Request immediate transfer to anywhere with better parties. Also, coffee restrictions have been lifted after Council determined caffeine was less of a combat drug and more of a social crutch. Mission accomplished, I guess." As he prepared to return to Earth, Kaplan couldn't help but smile, carefully keeping his teeth hidden to avoid triggering any residual panic. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest diplomatic victories come not from showing your strength, but from revealing your awkward humanity. The Council even gave him a parting gift, a mug labeled, "Contains harmless social enhancement chemicals." He had to admit, maybe they were starting to understand humans after all. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, whoever named his ship definitely not a warship was probably still laughing.